When I was young, creepypastas were, like, really bad. Just extremely violent, low-effort stories. Nowadays, though, they're not so focused on black-haired emo serial killer heartthrobs as they are long titles that are just, like, plain-out statements. Like, I've seen Down Beneath the Sewers, I Found a Roller Coaster, and I'm a marine biologist studying blue whales. They are not the largest animal. Okay, I've actually listened to some of these while drawing, and they're not actually that bad. But it's just hard to find a creepypasta that doesn't end in some kind of monster being revealed at the end. In my opinion, some of the best horror stories are the ones that are most conceivable in real life. Like, I feel like that's what made the first Five Nights at Freddy's so creepy in comparison to the others. The concept was simple. Possessed animatronics hunt you down. You don't see them running around on camera, except Foxy. So you can imagine them being slow and rigid like real animatronics that you'd find at, like, Chuck E. Cheese. The lore currently in Five Nights at Freddy's is not scary due to the fact that it's so science fiction based. And I get that was the point, but, like, I'm just not scared of William Afton and his robot daughter who was given 4 different bodies and, like, the illusion disc? I don't know. So that's besides the point. I'm just saying that it's a lot harder to suspend your disbelief when so many unreal things are taking place in what's meant to be the real world. So, that being said, back in the 2010s, creepypastas were like the embodiment of expecting your reader to suspend their disbelief. Nothing made sense. So, like, one day the main character would be a completely normal teenager, and the next they've, like, snapped and gone insane. So, the story of Laughing Jack was posted by user Snuffbomb on Creepypasta website in 2013. The original was just called Laughing Jack, but the story actually got so successful that Snuffbomb posted the story Laughing Jack's Origin. Both included meaningless gore and violence, which was just a staple of creepypasta at the time. I'm not saying I could do any better, but good horror writing isn't thinking of the most violent and gruesome imagery. I think it's more about the unknown and leaving it to the imagination. One good modern creepypasta I've listened to is about being on a plane and never being able to get off. With all the other passengers being completely aware that the flight hasn't ended, I think that's pretty scary. It's just taking human fears and pushing them. So, about Laughing Jack is that I'm going to be working with the origin story rather than the sequel, due to the Victorian setting being more interesting than the modern one. And at first, it isn't too edgy. It actually had kind of a nice premise to it, so I feel like it could be reworked. I'm mainly inspired by DreamWorks' She-Ra. They took a mainly average TV show where everyone looked the same so they could sell dolls and turned it into a show where everyone looked different and had more realistic body types. I like the idea of reworking kids' shows, or in this case creepypastas, to be better. So the origin of Laughing Jack starts off in London during the 1800s. The main character is a lonely kid with no friends called Isaac, who spends most of his time, like, living in his dusty attic doing nothing, I assume, because the story doesn't ever expand on him very much. Another staple of creepypastas at the time was to just, like, not give your main character any actual character. So, nowadays, though, most creepypastas are in first person, and you have, like, a blank protagonist so that you can project yourself onto them better. It works better in terms of horror, but the protagonists no longer have any real personalities, and because of that, fandoms don't grow around them. On Christmas Eve, a guardian angel sees Isaac's, quote, abysmal loneliness. I think it's pretty funny because can you imagine being called abysmally lonely? Basically, Isaac was so lonely that divine intervention was needed, and that's embarrassing. So the guardian angel creates a gift for Isaac, and he finds it on Christmas morning. It's a colorful wooden box sitting at the foot of his bed with a tag reading, Laughing Jack in a Box. I personally think that the name is adorable, but I can't place why. A lot of creepypasta characters at the time were named, like, Jack for some reason. I don't know why there was such an oversaturated market for names with the letter J on them. So Isaac tries winding up the box, but it doesn't work, so he puts it down and gets dressed. All of a sudden, though, a giant rainbow clown pops out of the box. I know in the story he's meant to be all rainbowy and be all the colors, but I didn't think it looked good. So I settled on making him just the different shades of pink instead. Jack says that whatever Isaac likes, he likes. And I appreciate that detail because it does technically then set up the eventual, like, murderous turn that Jack has, but it doesn't make the turn narratively any better. He also says you should wear that smile more often, it suits you, which is adorable. So I think Jack had a lot of redeeming qualities before his edgy turn at the end. Eventually, Isaac tells Jack that he's being sent off to boarding school and that he'll be back for him someday. I do wonder how Isaac's family could afford boarding school though, since it's been established that they're a poor family. This could either be changed by making his family rich, or by having him be sent off to work in a factory, which most poor Victorian children would have been doing then anyways. Now we're on to the part that I want to change. After 13 years, Isaac returns due to inheriting the house from his dead parents. However, the story gets really edgy at this part. Isaac is for some reason a murderer, and he makes chairs out of the skeletons of his victims, and I didn't like that. It really came out of nowhere. I understand that time changes people, but what if the boarding school turned this man into a murderer is what I want to know. And I understand that it has to be creepy, it's a creepypasta, but that's not how my version is gonna go. This version is more of a TV show sort of thing, like something marketable. So my version of grown-up Isaac is a jaded and serious but respected detective. The story starts with a murder, one that's taken place in his old abandoned childhood home. So he returns to investigate, but instead of the heartfelt reunion that Jack was hoping for, he just takes the box in as evidence, so Jack gets his hope up for nothing. The real reunion happens later on back at Isaac's current home, a more fancy place than his childhood one. Basically, his famous detective life has afforded him this home, and it's something Jack wouldn't be used to, since all of his life he's been stuck in a box in Isaac's old family house. Out of interest, I guess, Isaac winds up the music box and Jack pops up. But of course, to stay faithful to the original story, he's different. No longer as the vibrant pink, instead, he's more vulture-colored. I opted to make him dark and pale pinks, rather than full-on black and white like he is in the original story. I just felt like it would look better. And unlike his past form, the stripes on his arms are no longer the same width, they're all uneven. I tried giving him a more gothic but inaccurate Victorian outfit, and I made his suspenders hang loose and be not fitting anymore. In this version, he wouldn't be an unhinged murderer, but rather like a clingy and slightly unsettling person due to 13 years spent in a box. I feel like it could make him more of an endearing character, sort of like the fish out of water trope, with him getting used to the huge London after staying in a box for 13 years, basically. He pops out in Isaac's home, and for a brief moment he thinks they have their childhood friendship back, but Isaac just goes back to being serious and working on the murder case. In the same way that as friends grow up, you don't lose your love for them, but as an adult you just have less time to hang out. Jack doesn't expect this, because he's literally been made to play with children, and not an adult with a full-time job. So he's trying to get the adult Isaac's attention and interest in children's games, and trying to involve him with Isaac's line of work, even if he's not helping and rather hindering the investigation. I imagine the story going like Jack following Isaac around as they solve the murder case together, and Jack especially getting up in other people's faces, with Isaac just like wishing he'd keep himself hidden in public. Basically, it's a juxtaposition of the prologue, where Isaac just wants Jack to prove his existence in front of his parents. It's Jack trying to make up for it and not realizing that Isaac is actually trying to be professional. In summary, the main theme of the story would be changed, specifically regarding friendships and childhood, kinda like Amphibia does it. In the end though, Jack would have sort of matured in his own way as well, basically realizing that there's a time and place for work and playing games, but also being able to appreciate that Isaac is now an adult, and he doesn't actually want to play games anymore. Additionally, Isaac would learn to lighten up a little bit from Jack. So that's been my reworking of the Laughing Jack story. Honestly, there are worse creepypastas out there to reboot, but I've always had a soft spot for Laughing Jack, even as a kid. Plus, the premise of an imaginary friend gone wrong really did interest me. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't, then